Welcome to the Freak Show, fellow freaks.
I'm Matthew Brockmeyer.
And I'm Christa Carmen.
And this is...
Murder Coaster.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to a very special episode of Murder Coaster, for it involves one of my personal heroes, writer and Gonzo journalist Hunter S. Thompson. Hunter Thompson was a dichotomy in many ways, a left-leaning counterculture hippie, championing civil rights and social injustice, but a staunch Second Amendment activist with a deep love of guns and personal freedom. A fierce libertarian that believed the individual controlled their own destiny. A lover of freaks and anarchists. But despite these paradoxes, or perhaps because of them, Hunter S. Thompson was truly American in the rawest and purest form of the word. He first found fame in the 60s, writing about the outlaw motorcycle club, the Hells Angels, living amongst them until they stomped and beat him senseless. Then, writing for Rolling Stone magazine, his drug-fueled journalistic forays into politics and American culture led to a distinctive writing style he defined as Gonzo, where the writer becomes a part of the story, and the story always goes off the rails. Today we chronicle the last case of social injustice this counterculture icon championed, taking on the Denver Police Department and the state of Colorado. It is a tale of Grateful Deadheads and Nazi skinheads. So wild and utterly gonzo, it seems a thing of fiction. But it is true. Very, very true. In the immortal words of Hunter himself, when the going gets weird, the weird turn pro.
Let's begin. Prologue. The phone call. At 3 a.m. in late 2003, Mark Seal, contributing editor of Vanity Fair magazine, was awakened with a phone call. It was none other than legendary Gonzo journalist Hunter S. Thompson, growling into the phone with his iconic voice.
Mark, God damn it, it's Hunter. I know you're asleep, but we gotta do something about Lisl Auman. This case is so rotten and wrong and shameful that I feel dirty just for knowing about it. And so should you. The legal system has failed this girl every step of the way. Remember, she could be anybody's daughter. Yours or mine.
Lisl Auman, inmate number 99154, was the first person in Colorado to be convicted of a murder that occurred while she was in police custody. For nearly 3 years, Hunter Thompson had been working to free her. Now he was ready to take the fight to a new level. As he would say,
I was raised to believe the police officers were decent, honorable people, just like us. But that was a long time ago in a very different country. Now I know different. I know that police are the enemy, cruel and stupid and greedy and dishonest, in a way that would shame the Hells Angels. At least the Hells Angels get respect. Today it's Lisl Auman, but tomorrow it could be you, me, us.
10 years earlier, Lisl Auman had been convicted and sentenced to life in prison without the chance of parole for a murder that was committed while she was in handcuffs in the back of a police car.
Lisl had been convicted on an ancient and archaic charge called the Felony murder law.
which had been established in England in the 1700s and abolished there in 1957 for being too severe. It states that when someone is murdered during or after the commission of certain felonies, including burglary, everyone present during the first felony is guilty of the murder, whether they caused it or not.
And Hunter was pissed off. Hunter believed that the law was draconian, ridiculous, a travesty, and that an article in Vanity Fair would get the right people involved, bring attention to what he saw as a great misjustice of society. Hunter S. Thompson was not only a writer and journalist, but an activist. This would be the last case he took on. And this, ladies and gentlemen, is the story of Lisl Auman.
Chapter 1. Lisl. Lisl Auman was born on Christmas Day in 1976.
Lisl was named after the girl in The Sound of Music, who was 16 going on 17, and fell in love with a Nazi boy.
I liked the character from the film. Lisl loved music, and also a young Nazi would factor significantly into her life.
Lisl grew up in a typical middle-class neighborhood in Littleton, Colorado, just outside of Denver. Her father was the plumbing shop foreman at the local university, and her mother processed insurance claims.
In 1986, Lisl's parents divorced, but remained amiable. They agreed to co-custody, and Lisl spent her youth alternating between each of them.
Lisl and her best friend, Demetria Soriano, or Demi, were self-described hippies and flower children as teenagers, and were all about the Grateful Dead, going to shows when the Dead came to Colorado, and always listening to their American folk rock, smoking weed, and dropping the occasional hit of acid or munching on the stems of psychedelic mushrooms.
But after they graduated high school, Jerry Garcia sadly passed away and the Grateful Dead stopped touring, at least in that incantation. Lisl did a semester in college, then dropped out. She got married, then got divorced. In 1997, she was 21 years old and kind of just drifting through life, as the Grateful Dead would say, looking for the secret, searching for the sound.
She loved nature, so she drove her 1982 Saab into the mountains outside of Denver and got a reforestation job in Buffalo Creek, where 12,000 acres had been scorched by fire before floods washed over 300,000 cubic yards of sediment in Denver's Strontia Springs Reservoir.
Lisl cleared debris, sandbagging and retrenching during the day, partying at night with her fellow workers. She met a logger named Sean Cheever, a big guy with lots of muscles, who lived at a rooming house called The Lodge.
The Lodge was a ramshackle structure with a dozen rooms and no heat. It had started as a boys' camp, then became an empowerment center, then a hotel, before becoming a rooming house for reforestation workers. It was in a state of disrepair. There was no heat, and rooms had to be locked with a padlock occupants purchased on their own.
Lisl moved into the lodge. She had her own room, but she'd often spend the night in Sean's room. But Sean, who's been described as a, quote, dirtbag, treated her badly, and there were a lot of rumors about Sean, that he was a thief and a bad guy.
Lisl discovered he had several aliases and a long arrest record for thievery and sale and manufacture of controlled substance, and the relationship began to fall apart. Then, on September 22nd, Sean was arrested for second-degree burglary, forgery, and theft, skipping his trial date.
One day, Lisl woke up, and Sean was gone. They were supposed to celebrate Sean's 27th birthday, but he had taken off and ended up getting arrested for skipping his court date.
Heartbroken, angry, and humiliated, she moved back to Denver, leaving most of her belongings behind.
She planned on going back and getting all of her belongings, but her car registration was overdue, the license plates expired, so she needed a ride, as well as some help moving.
Her father said he'd help her, but she'd have to wait a week or so until he got time off. Finally, she contacted her old friend Demi, who had a car, and said, "Sure, I'll come help you. Come by my apartment and let's catch up."
Chapter 2. Demi. Demi had gone pretty astray since their time as deadhead hippies and flower children. She'd moved from smoking weed and dropping the occasional hit of acid into the dangerous world of crystal meth amphetamine.
But the strangest thing was that Demi was now dating a Nazi skinhead, and as Demi says, she was not white. Now, you may be wondering, why would a woman of color be dating a Nazi skinhead?
Demi herself says she doesn't really know, that it was a bizarre mix of danger, excitement, and hard drugs that she just found incredibly sexy. As she says,
"It was lots of fun at first, but it just got really evil really fast."
Now, for listeners who may not be familiar with skinhead culture, the term Nazi skinhead is itself, in a way, a kind of oxymoron, as the roots of the skinhead culture come from black folks, the entire movement having grown out of Jamaican rude boy culture.
During the 1950s and early 60s, there was a great migration of Jamaicans to Britain, as they were granted British citizenship, and they brought with them the music of ska, rocksteady, and reggae, as well as the slick style of rude boys that was picked up on by the white British mod kids.
By the 70s, the rude boy look of a fedora hat, sunglasses, skinny tie, and two-tone clothes had evolved into a working class look of jeans, suspenders, and Doc Martens, or boots and braces. It went from being slick and stylish to tough, utilitarian, extremely anti-hippie, and the music's changed from ska and rocksteady to a primitive punk rock-inspired sound, often labeled as oi.
These new skinheads liked to drink and fight. Many were hooligans who went to football, or as we in America would call it, soccer games, to start trouble. People began to fear them, and egged on by that power, they leaned into their violent image, which was soon picked up on by Britain's far-right and racist National Front Party, who embraced them.
By the 1980s, the youth movement, which had been inspired by the music and style of Jamaican immigrants, had turned into a violent, racist, and fascist group. Not that all skinheads went down that road. Many stayed true to the original roots, keeping that rude boy look, and anti-racist groups like Sharps or Skinheads Against Racial Prejudice came about. But the image of a skinhead is a rowdy, working-class tough, wary of immigrants with racist instincts, sadly stuck. And that was the image that eventually imported itself to the United States.
And that is the type of skinhead that Lisl's best friend Demi was now dating. A Nazi skinhead named Dion Guerzi, a member of the Denver Skins gang.
Denver, Colorado has a long legacy of racism. In the 1920s, the Ku Klux Klan would march through the streets led by the governor. And Colorado boasted the second highest Klan population in America. In 1984, a white supremacist group called the Silent Brotherhood gunned down local Jewish radio host Alan Berg. And by 1991, Denver was home to an estimated 400 Nazi skinheads who would disrupt Martin Luther King Jr. Day celebrations and loudly celebrated Hitler's birthday.
Demi had known Dion since they were in the 7th grade together, and the two had often fallen into romantic trysts. Dion had even stolen Deemee's parents' car at one point.
Dion, who now had a long record of aggravated robbery, assault, and trespassing, moved into Deemee's condominium. He hung a Confederate flag up, as well as antique revolvers, knives, brass knuckles, and torture instruments. They'd have violent sex. In fact, the morning of November 12th, 1997, Deemee had bruises around her neck from where Dion had choked her out the night before.
So, heartbroken and without a legal car, Lisl went to her old best friend's place looking for a shoulder to cry on. Surprised to see all the weapons hanging on the wall, and pretty much dumbstruck to see racist propaganda around.
As the friends reminisced, getting drunk on sake, Lisl began ranting about her ex, Sean Cheever, saying,
"He's such a jerk, and he's treating me like crap, and I just want to get my stuff and get out."
And that's when Dion walked in with his boots and braces and bald head, saying, "You shouldn't put up with that. I got some friends. We'll help you move."
And that's when Lisl made the biggest mistake of her life, by saying yes to letting a Nazi skinhead help her move.
The friends that Dion were talking about were Steve Droopy and Mathis Jonig, who went by the nickname, of all things, Dow.
Chapter 3. Mathis Dow Jonig. Mathis Jonig, or Dow, was a 6'4" giant, 200 pounds with a shaved head and covered in tattoos, including skulls, swastikas, SS lightning bolts, and the Nazi slogan, "Blood and Honor."
He loved guns. Friends would say that he was guns. This violent and terrifying guy smoked piles of crystal meth and rode about in a stolen red Trans Am he called the Thunder Chicken.
Dow was the son of a pacifist pastor who emigrated from Germany and opened the Denver Waldorf School, which encouraged free thinking in the children of some of the city's wealthiest citizens, and the family lived in a literal mansion.
Despite all his Nazi tattoos, his mother insists that he wasn't actually a racist, but that he did have a deep hatred of the police.
As a child, Dow was incredibly shy and had learning problems, never learning to read or write too well. He loved the outdoors, hunting and fly fishing in the mountains, and dreamed of becoming a park ranger. But that required a college degree, so that dream was soon abandoned.
Dow dropped out of school in the 10th grade. At 18, he fathered a child he named Ruger, after the handgun. And Ruger's mother moved into his family's mansion with him. But after violent arguments, she soon moved out.
At 19, Dow got the first of his numerous concealed weapon charges and was denied visitation rights with his son.
Soon after this, Dow joined the Denver Skins, whom the police classified as a white supremacist organization. One member had shot a man whose car he was trying to steal, then showed off the body to his friends before setting it on fire.
Dow was described as a Neanderthal, a bully, and a brawler, and it was reported that he had attended the Aryan Nation's training camp in Idaho.
Dow found work as a stagehand for rock and roll groups like the Rolling Stones and Metallica, a job that suited him well, as he'd, quote, sleep until noon, eat like a horse, drink like a mule, and smoke huge quantities of crystal meth.
In the summer of 1993, he was arrested at a party for sicking his dogs on two police responding to a fireworks complaint.
During his arrest, he told the police, "You guys just walked in on a skinhead party."
The officers asked, "What, Aryan Nation Brotherhood? KKK?"
"No," Dow said. "The Aryan Brotherhood are all older guys. The KKK, they have their protests. We're skins. We're in-your-face, violent."
One of the officers was an ex-Marine bodybuilder, twice decorated for bravery, who had a master's degree and was working on a PhD in psychology. His name was Bruce Vanderjag. Remember the name.
3 years later, Dow cracked his former girlfriend in the head before pulling a gun on her, threatening to kill her and stealing $200 from her purse. He pled guilty to third-degree assault and was supposed to spend a whole year in jail, but the judge suspended his sentence.
By 1997, Dow had been arrested on more than 20 charges, including drug possession, assault, and criminal mischief for slashing a cop's truck tires.
On November 12, 1997, Dow had just returned to Denver after working a tour for the Rolling Stones when his fellow skinhead gang member Dion called him, saying there was a girl who needed help moving, and if he helped, he was sure that she would sleep with him.
Dow was all about it and invited his friend Steve Dupre along as well. He ate a massive breakfast, smoked a shit ton of crystal meth, hopped into the Thunder Chicken with 2 rifles, a shotgun, and a machete, and headed out to help Lisl Auman, a girl he'd never met before, move her belongings from the mountains down to Denver.
As Lisl would later say,
"He thought I was going to be an easy score."
Chapter 4, That Day in November. After meeting the hawking Nazi skinhead covered in swastika tattoos, Lisl, a self-proclaimed peace and love hippie, was uneasy.
She and Demi went to Taco Bell for breakfast, and Lisl told her friend, "I just don't feel right about this."
But Demi responded, "Everything's arranged, and you really just don't tell these people no."
Lisl would later say, "I didn't want to find out why you don't tell these people no. I didn't trust these people, and I felt trapped. They were intimidating."
Playing the matchmaker, Dion had Lisl ride with Dow, and the other 3 piled into Demi's black Cavalier. The caravan headed up into the mountains, driving along Highway 285 through Twin Forks and Aspen Park, veering onto Country Road 126 in Silver Springs, and then down to Buffalo Creek.
They arrived at the lodge a little before 2 and began collecting Lisl's things, some of which were in Cheever's room, using a bolt cutter to get in, and taking some of Cheever's belongings as well, in apparent retribution, namely 2 large speakers and a box of CDs, although what was really his is debatable.
Yeah, back in the 90s, it was all about these big stereo speakers, and those speakers were said to be particularly bitchin'. They were a status symbol in many ways.
When residents of the lodge saw that Cheever's door had been opened with bolt cutters and a group of Nazi skinheads were loading some of his belongings into their car, they called the police and reported a burglary.
Sensing something was up, that cops were on their way, the group jumped in their cars and headed out. Demi, Dion, and Steve in Demi's Cavalier, and Lisl and Dow in the Thunder Chicken, Dow's stolen red Trans Am, each headed in different directions.
Chapter 5. The Chase.
It was already a very tense time between police and Nazi skinheads. Only 5 days earlier, 2 skinheads had kidnapped a girl, then ended up on a 37-minute police chase, driving the wrong way down the highway and firing guns. One of the skinheads actually wrote the cops a letter from jail, saying, "Ha ha, fuck all you pigs."
The Jefferson County Commissioner declared a readiness to, quote, go to war with the skinheads and provide machine guns and tanks for the sheriff's office.
Now, Lisl Auman, a peace and love hippie deadhead, is with this 6'4" Nazi skinhead she's just met in a stolen car packed with guns, and he's high out of his mind on meth, barreling down Highway 285 at breakneck speeds through these icy corkscrews, roaring through the heart of Jefferson County, through Broken Arrow Acres, when flashing lights and the roar of a siren came racing up behind him.
Aren't you going to pull over? Lisl asked the Nazi skinhead.
"Fuck no," Dow said. "I'm never going back to jail again." And he slammed his foot on the gas, hitting 110 miles per hour as they squealed around hairpin turns.
As they came screaming into Denver, it looked like they'd lost the officer, when another patrol car came screeching up behind them.
"Well, I guess this is what I'm gonna have to do," Dow said, and he pulled out a Chinese SKS semi-automatic rifle, modified with a 30-round magazine, rolled down the window, turned to Lisl, and said, "Take the wheel."
Lisl didn't know what to do. The car was swaying, speedometer crossing triple digits. If she didn't grab the wheel, they'd crash. So she grabbed the wheel and tried to steer as Dow leaned out the window and started firing rounds at the police officer, the red thunder chicken swerving dangerously as she struggled to steer it.
Patrol car slowed down at the oncoming stream of bullets, and Dow jerked back into the Thunder Chicken, grabbing the wheel, swerving through the city streets, the patrol car now gone. Then he broadsided a car and was slammed from behind by another car.
Lisl opened the door, tried to escape, but Dow grabbed her and said,
"Where the fuck do you think you're going?"
Dow then calmly drove them to Deemy's condominium and backed up into a spot.
Police officers Jason Brake and Mark Bennett were raiding cheap hotels and busting sex workers on East Colfax Avenue when word went out about the red Trans Am with the Nazi skinhead hanging out the window with an SKS firing at police as he came barreling into Denver from the 285. So they, as Officer Bennett would later say, quote, "kicked it up and started running hot," end quote. And within minutes, they spotted the Thunder Chicken tucked in the back of the Monaco Palace condominium complex parking lot.
Deemy and the other skinheads hadn't gotten back yet, so the door was locked. The entrance is in this little alcove, and when Dow saw the cops rolling up, he started trying to kick the door in.
Lisl is standing next to him, trembling, just stunned, and she makes eye contact with the police, who scream at her, "Hands up!"
Lisl put her hands up and stumbled forward, and the cops grabbed her, threw her down in the snow, and handcuffed her as Dow went running off in the other direction, disappearing in the maze of the condominium complex.
The officers screamed at Lisl. "Where'd he go? Where'd he go?"
And she stammered, I don't know, as they shoved her into the back of the police car.
And then 100 police officers converged on the condominium complex. Some in riot gear, and began searching for Dow, who had run into a 15-foot dead-end stairwell alcove.
One of the officers, in a strange twist of fate, Bruce Vanderjag, the same ex-Marine working on a PhD who Dow had sicked his dogs on during the skinhead party, came creeping along the outer wall, and as he came to the edge of the alcove, he peeked his head around to look inside.
There was Mathis Dow Janig, standing with his SKS raised, and he quickly let off several rounds, one of which hit the left side of Officer Bruce Vanderjag's forehead, blowing the left side of his head clear off.
Seeing Officer Vanderjag's head explode, the other officers unloaded in what one officer would describe as, quote, panic fire, saying,
"There were probably more rounds fired in that shooting than anything in the history of Denver."
Not a single shot hit Dow, who squeezed himself into the doorway of the alcove, firing back at them.
But it appears that in their panic, they shot their downed fellow officer, Bruce Vanderjag. He was shot 10 times altogether, 3 in the back, from several different types of guns.
Dow was now out of bullets, desperate, surrounded. He took a pen and scrawled, Dow was here on the wall. But he spelled here Hear.
So sad, man. He then crept out to where Officer Vanderjag's body lay in that no man's land on the edge of the alcove and pulled his revolver from his dead fingers and scampered back, put the barrel below his chin, and squeezed the trigger.
After 3 hours of silence, police closed in on the alcove, finding Dow lying there in a puddle of blood, the giant having slayed himself.
Chapter 6, Post-Mortem. As Lisl was taken to the police station, having no idea what was going on, one of the officers turned to her and screamed, "You're going down for murder."
At the station, Lisl voluntarily agreed to participate in 2 taped interviews, waiving her right to an attorney.
The interviews are weird. She's obviously in shock, but it also feels like she's holding things back, even being evasive. Later, she'd say that she didn't know Dow was dead, that she thought he was still alive, and was terrified he was going to find her and kill her for being a snitch, or have one of his gang members do it.
She said, yeah, I steered the car while he shot at police, but if I hadn't, we would have crashed. She denied ever intending to burglarize her ex's place, but she did admit she had told the others about the bitching set of speakers he owned.
Lisl was charged with burglary, menacing, and assault, and the Denver district attorney said he was holding her for further questioning, but not pursuing a homicide case against her.
Then Denver just went absolutely crazy with skinhead violence. It's just nuts. There was a literal skinhead war going on in the late 90s in Denver.
Just days later, 2 skinheads gunned down an African immigrant at a bus stop. When a woman ran to help him, they shot her in the back as well, shouting racial slurs at the 2 of them.
Then a pig carcass with the name Vanderjag scrawled on its side and a badge drawn on its belly was left in a police station parking lot.
2 days after that, a skinhead started shooting at the cops, and they came out in SWAT gear, marching in the streets, helicopters circling. It was a full-on war between Nazi skinheads and the cops. And Lisl, the hippie deadhead, was stuck right in the middle.
The mayor declared he was, quote, pissed off, and President Clinton, who 2 days before had declared a war on hate at a White House conference, came to Colorado and met with Officer Vanderjag's widow, trying to calm the tempest.
An officer was dead, and they needed someone to blame, someone to punish. A sacramental goat to pin the sins on, a scapegoat. And there was Lisl.
Prosecutors dubbed her the, quote, fuse, saying she willingly steered the car so that he could fire at the cops, and then assisted him during the standoff.
The initial reports from the first 2 officers on the scene both said that Lisl had held up her hands as soon as she had seen them and quickly came forward. But then, days later, they provided additional statements that contradicted that, saying she had leaned down to the right as if to drop something before raising her hands, which the officers interpreted as her possibly dropping or slipping down his gun.
Lisl, of course, vehemently denied ever having held his gun at any point, saying, I never made any dipping motion. When they told me to come out, I came out.
Lisl's family reached out for legal help, but all the good lawyers wanted at least a $100,000 retainer, and they just couldn't afford it. Later, her mother would say,
looking back now, I wish I would have sold my house to raise the money.
And her father would say, we just thought, damn it, she's innocent. We just thought it would work out.
Meanwhile, prosecutors were working behind the scenes to charge her with the archaic felony murder law, saying having been guilty of a felony preceding the murder, burglary as in the stealing of the bitching stereo speakers from her ex, she was therefore guilty for the murder that followed as well.
And there's some crazy legal psychobabble involved too, like the issue of immediate flight. So if Lisl was in the back of the police car for a full 10 minutes before Officer Vanderjag died, her flight from the burglary would have been stopped the moment she was arrested. But if she was still helping Dow by being combative while in the back of the police car, the prosecution could say she was still participating in the felony even while incarcerated.
So then the cop who put Lisl in the back of his squad car also revised his statement. First, he had reported that she was not hostile, and quoted her as saying, after hearing the news of Vanderjag's death, I'm really sorry for your friend. I didn't mean for this to happen.
But then he amends his report to say that she was actually very aggressive and subordinate, somehow resisting him, even though, come on, she's in handcuffs in the back of a cop car. What's she gonna do?
Once all of these new police statements were presented, the DA charged Lisl with 10 counts, including burglary, menacing, and felony murder, with a maximum penalty of life in prison without the chance of parole.
Lisl's mom would say,
we knew nothing about the felony murder law until the DA explained it on the news. We were just totally shocked. How How could she be responsible for something that she didn't do?
The district attorney offered a plea deal, saying if she pled guilty to assaulting a police officer when she was steering Dow's Trans Am, she'd only get a 30-year sentence and be out in 16 years. But her public defender assured her a jury would find her innocent. She'd been handcuffed in the back of a police car when the murder happened, after all.
Chapter 7. The Trial.
My pocketbook is empty and my heart is full of pain. I'm 1,000 miles away from home, just waiting for a train.
Lisl's trial began on July 8th, 1998, and lasted just 9 days. She was doomed from the start.
Tim Twinning, the chief prosecutor for the DA's gang unit, decimated the public defender's feeble defense and lack of legal acuity.
Lisl's mom would say, "The trial was horrible, an us versus them atmosphere."
On one side of the courtroom sat Officer Vanderjack's widow, Anna, surrounded by Denver police officers, and on the other side were the defendant's family and friends, who were branded as Nazi sympathizers.
After deliberating for a few hours, the jury announced that they were hung, and Judge Nancy Rice told them to get back in there and keep on trying.
One juror, Linda Chin, says,
"I never did think she was guilty, but the prosecutors were making us feel that if we didn't put a stop to all of this violence with first-degree murder, we weren't doing our jobs. A policeman had been killed. Somebody had to pay. I'm thinking, what could she get? 3 to 5 years max? So I voted guilty."
Lisl Auman was found guilty of first-degree murder, second-degree burglary, menacing, and conspiracy to commit first-degree burglary. She was subsequently sentenced to life in prison without parole and sent to the Women's Correctional Facility in Canyon City, Colorado.
Lisl's best friend, Beamy, was charged with burglary, took a plea deal, and received 2 years of probation, as did her boyfriend, Dion Guernsey. Dow's friend, Stephen Dupree, ended up getting 4 years in prison for his role.
And then, 9 months after the trial, 12 teenagers and a teacher were gunned down by 2 students at Columbine High School in Lisl Auman's hometown of Littleton, Colorado. And the public, well, they pretty much forgot about the shootout at the Monaco Place condominium complex.
Chapter 8. Post-conviction. Lisl's parents, in a state of shock, set up a website and wrote to all the famous attorneys. Jerry Spence, Alan Dershowitz, Barry Scheck, but none of them seemed interested in the case.
While in jail, Elsie had read Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas, which another inmate had lent her. Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas has become a classic of American literature, been turned into films starring Bill Murray and Johnny Depp. It's about a drug-fueled trip to Las Vegas that is a, quote, savage journey to the heart of the American dream.
In prison, Lisl went to the library for more of Thompson's work and was mistakenly told that all of his books were banned throughout the Colorado Department of Corrections.
So Lisl wrote Hunter S. Thompson a letter saying,
"Dear Dr. Thompson, I laughed out loud while reading Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas during my stay, 13 months, at the Denver County Jail. Thank you for helping to bring a smile to my face. I am now a hostage at the Colorado Women's Correctional Facility in Canyon City. I feel somewhat connected to you in the surreality of the lives, however different, we lead. Yes, my life is surreal in a nightmarish sort of way. Amongst the many disappointments in my life, one happens to be directly connected to you. These motherfuckers banned your books from this and every other Department of Corrections library. How do you feel about that? I think it sucks. So I can only hope that one day I will be vindicated and I will be able to go home, wherever that is, and pleasure my humor with more of your writing. I, in case you're wondering who the hell I am, not that my case history is who I am, My name is Lisl Auman, and I was convicted of felony murder in 1998 for the murder of a police officer. However, I maintain my innocence. I just turned 25 years old and also have an awesome family who supports me 100% every step of the way. Check out the website they set up for me at www.lisl.com. Only if you're interested, of course. Bye-bye, Lisl.
Hunter, a self-described news junkie, he knew all about the case, and he wrote her back, saying,
Thank you for the kind note. I remember following your case in the newspaper, being horrified by it. I checked out your website today and got some valuable information from it. Tomorrow I will call your lawyer, Kathy Lord in Denver, and see what I can learn about your current situation. Maybe I can write a story and stir up some interest. We'll see. I don't know what the rules are about sending anything to you in prison, but I'll find out and try to send you something that will make you laugh. Possibly I can help you. But I can't be sure or even optimistic at this point. I don't even know if this letter will reach you at all. So if it does, please let me know immediately. I know what it's like to be locked up and how hard it is to keep your sense of humor cranked. Write me anytime you feel like it. Okay? Hunter.
Hunter then wrote about the case on his ESPN.com column, causing 100,000 people to go on her website. Her parents thought it was a computer glitch at first.
But that was just the beginning.
Every year, Hunter had a big party at his farm in Woody Creek outside Aspen for the Super Bowl, having had folks from Jimmy Carter to Keith Richards there.
So in 2001, Hunter invited members of the National Association of Criminal Defense Lawyers, who were in Aspen for their annual criminal law seminar, to the party.
At halftime, he presented the elite lawyers with reams of paperwork on Lisl's case and straight up challenged them to free her and overturn the felony murder law and its accompanying mandatory life sentence. At first, the lawyers balked, as Hunter would later say.
The tide was going against me. I could sense it. Everyone was finding reasons not to do this, but I kept driving it like a hammer on a nail.
Then, New York-based attorney and former NACDL president Gerald Lefcourt gave in, saying, "This is not going to be easy. Well, what the hell, count me in." With that, the NACDL entered the appeals process, and the Lisl Auman Defense Fund began.
Hunter went into full-on activist mode, calling everyone he knew non-stop, hounding them, challenging them, embarrassing them into action in that way that only Hunter S. Thompson can do.
He turned renowned Texas attorney Jerry Goldstein, who was living in Aspen, onto the case.
He turned Morris Dees, chief trial counsel of the Southern Poverty Law Center, onto the case.
Morris Dees is a legendary lawyer who in 1987 bankrupted America's major KKK group in a lynching case, and in 2000 won a landmark lawsuit against the Aryan Nation's neo-Nazi compound in Idaho.
Hunter also enlisted his friends Johnny Depp, Benicio del Toro, Jimmy Buffett, Jack Nicholson, John Cusack, Woody Harrelson, and Warren Zevon.
Matt Moseley, communications director of the Colorado Senate Democrats, suggested they have a rally, and Hunter responded,
"Hot damn, let's pull the trigger. Let's do a rally."
So on May 14th, 2001, Hunter and a huge group of activists from all over gathered on the steps of the Colorado State Capitol, where a stage was set up.
Warren Zevon played his iconic song, Lawyers, Guns, and Money, then stated, "I want to emphasize the fact that for me, personally, the great tragedy here is still the death of Officer Vanderjack, But if we get our grief and our indignation mixed up with Lisl Auman's punishment, then it's not justice anymore. It's a crime.
Thompson took the stage, shaking his fists at the cops lined up in the crowd and shouting to the crowd.
This is not about Lisl, really. This is about you. What happened to her could happen to anybody. It's easy to get sucked into the system, even when you're innocent. My response has always been to fight savagely. I'm going to stay in this thing until she's out and until the felony murder law is overturned.
Later, Hunter would say,
Many of those who stood on the Capitol steps Monday were veteran warriors from the civil rights movement. It was good training for the even more brutal confrontations we would face later. It's very important to learn early in life that you can beat City Hall, that you can change the system. You might be beaten and gassed by police a few times before you succeed, but that stuff goes with the territory.
Then came the Vanity Fair article, Hunter saying,
Any law enforcement system that deliberately and maliciously buries a clearly innocent young woman in the state penitentiary for the rest of her life with no possibility of parole is dangerously vicious and a permanent disgrace to the once proud state of Colorado. It is rotten and wrong and shames every person who lives here, including every judge sitting on the state Supreme Court and every cop who falsely put her there. It was my duty to get involved in this case and speak strongly because nobody else would. The girl was innocent, but nobody in Denver dared to speak out against the police. It is dangerous in Denver to get on the wrong side of the DPD. The cops know she is innocent, but she's locked up anyway because somebody had to go down. That is the law of the West. An eye for an eye and a life for a life, no exceptions and no mercy. Bang, you're dead, as a lesson to the others. Now we are finally getting to the point of this horrible case. Is there anything fair about it? Anything at all? Is there anything even sane about it? No, there is not. Fairness and sanity went out the window a long time ago with regard to Lisl Auman's punishment. This one goes back to the law of the Fang. It may be the only law the DPD doesn't routinely violate. I have come to hate this case more than any story I've ever worked on, at least since the trial of Richard Nixon and the Manson family murders. This one is no longer about points of law or precedent, but entirely about the difference between right and wrong in America. The time has come to stand up and be counted, to declare which side you were on, today and forever.
Colorado Public Defender Kathleen Lord appealed Lisl's conviction in May 2001, stating that she had no longer been in immediate flight once she had been detained by police, and that her arrest terminated her liability for murder.
But the Colorado Court of Appeals disagreed, and in September 2002 affirmed Lisl's initial convictions.
It appeared it had all been for naught.
Chapter 9, The Fall of a Titan.
The following years were tough ones for Hunter.
He'd accurately predicted every future president for his entire career as a political journalist. But in 2004, he got it wrong for the very first time, predicting John Kerry would win. The re-election of George W. Bush, who he saw as a tyrant, put him in a deep depression.
He had several medical issues as well. Hip replacement surgery, a broken leg, a lung infection, regular dehydration, an intestinal condition, severe spinal pain. He hated hospitals. Every doctor he met at first sight was Kevorkian, every nurse Mildred Ratchet out of One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest.
He'd always relied on the folk wisdom of friends. Muhammad Ali told him to eat massive amounts of grapefruits, and so he did. Ken Kesey told him that being a heavy drinker, he needed to eat heaping quantities of food to survive. So lumberjack-style breakfasts started his days. Jerry Garcia told him to monitor his blood pressure every day, which he did.
But a lifetime of fast living and drug abuse were taking their toll both physically and mentally. Hunter would write to a friend about growing old.
Jesus, can you imagine the hideous nightmare of feeling yourself slipping into a fuzzy kind of coma and drooling when you try to talk, and never quite remembering just who was who in the terrible fusion of all your memories, and haunted for the rest of your life by sudden flashbacks of Mussolini and Pablo Casals in Paris, or maybe St. Louis and Tangier in the fog or the winter, or maybe when the sun was turning orange off the Big Sur coast, sinking down to China, and somebody who was either your grandfather or Mick Jagger fondling your nuts.
Hunter had always viewed taking his own life as an option, seeing it as the ultimate act of personal freedom.
And many of his personal heroes had felt the same.
Back in 1964, writing for the National Observer, Hunter made a pilgrimage to Ketchum, Idaho, in search of why his personal hero, writer Ernest Hemingway, committed suicide with a 12-gauge shotgun.
After days of interviewing locals, he came up with a matter-of-fact conclusion about his idol's sad last days, saying, "He was an old, sick, and very troubled man, and contentment was not enough for him."
Oh, I've been a moonshiner for 17 long years, and I've spent all my money on whiskey and beers. I go to some hollow.
Hunter then engaged in an act of symbolic Gonzo thievery, stealing a pair of elk horns that hung proudly over the entrance to Hemingway's house, later saying,
"I took them. Forget running with the bulls, or reeling in marlins, or slaughtering rhinos. I had Hemingway's horns. And with that came an immense literary responsibility. It was now fuck you to the competition. I had broken from the pack, and there was no turning back."
Follow, see what I've spent.
Around Thanksgiving, Hunter began morbidly telling friends that he wasn't afraid to take his own life, like his hero Hemingway.
Around the same time, he and his wife Anita began fighting. She was very upset with his morbid talk of suicide and refused to listen to it.
On February 20th, Hunter wrote a suicide note of sorts, saying,
"Football season is over. No more games, no more bombs, no more walking, no more fun, no more swimming. 67. That is 17 years past 50. 17 more than I needed or wanted. Boring. I am always bitchy. No fun for anybody. 67. You are getting greedy. Act your age. Relax. This won't hurt."
At 5:16 p.m., Hunter's wife Anita called him from her health club, Hunter telling her,
"Come home, Anita. Everything is all right. Come home." But while he was saying this, she heard a strange clicking noises.
"I thought he was doing something to the TV," she later recalled, "so I casually hung up."
Hunter took a .45 caliber gun, placed the barrel in his mouth, and pulled the trigger. telephone falling and dangling at his side. The bullet ripped through his skull, exited the back of his head, and embedded itself in the metal stove vent behind him.
The great Hunter S. Thompson, Gonzo journalist, mad free spirit, fierce libertarian, was dead.
Fuck, man, I remember that day. I was in San Francisco. Cried like a baby.
Chapter 10. More appeals for Lisl. Lisl's lawyers, meanwhile, had appealed her case to the Colorado Supreme Court. In their response in March 2005, the Supreme Court maintained that Auman's liability for murder did not terminate upon her arrest. However, they agreed with Lord's argument that the instructions given to the jury regarding her burglary charge were faulty, as they did not specify that she must have acted knowingly in taking Cheever's property when she entered his room.
As Lisl had stated, she did not intend to steal her boyfriend's property, the bitchin' speakers, and she did not personally take any of the items. It was the skinheads who had grabbed them.
The court felt the jury could have been misled by their improper instructions, and therefore reversed both Auman's burglary and murder convictions, as her conviction for murder was predicated on her burglary conviction, calling for a new trial.
When Lisl heard the news, she called her lawyer and sang the Beatles classic Blackbird into the phone.
Blackbird singing in the dead of night. Take these sunken eyes and learn to see. All your life, you are only waiting for this moment to be free.
In July 2005, Lisl accepted a plea deal in which she pleaded guilty to burglary and accessory to first-degree murder, avoiding a retrial, and was resentenced to 20 years of community corrections and discharged from prison into a halfway house in October of 2006.
When I was a cricket, I lived in a backyard, and little boy ripped off my legs. The times they were hard, I could not do the things.
She was released from her halfway house in April 2006 under the restrictions that she remain in the Denver area and submit to close supervision for another 8 years.
And so, Hunter S. Thompson's last great fight was a success, though he'd never know it. Never get to give her a hug as she strode free from prison.
Scraps off some other killer's lines, yeah. I will be born again. I will be reincarnated.
Anita would say, "It is a good day for Gonzo." Hunter abhorred any lack of freedom. Our spirits are high and we're grateful. Personally, it's bittersweet for me. I know Hunter is smiling on us. I just wish he was here with us right now to toast and hug.
Interestingly, one of Lisl's supporters who rejoiced at her freedom was none other than Officer Vanderjack's widow, who proclaimed,
I think Bruce himself would have had a lot of trouble with the idea of someone being convicted of murder while they were in police custody.
Sky still dry, it caused me to stumble. Send my family down to the water and oh, there was no water.
Chapter 11, The Final Goodbye.
It lost our minds, but we could get on, yeah. I will be born again. I will be reincarnated. I will be born again.
Hunter had long stated he wanted to be cremated and have his ashes shot from a cannon across his farm.
So Hunter's good friend, Johnny Depp, who had famously portrayed him in both Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas, as well as The Rum Diaries, put up $3 million of his own money to construct a massive tower, 153 feet tall, taller than the Statue of Liberty, a dagger, topped with the iconic Gonzo symbol, a double-thumbed freak fist, dripping a glowing peyote button. And on August 20th, 2005, a spirit in the sky blared. With a deafening boom, the ashes of Hunter S. Thompson were blown into the sky and across Owl Farm.
As the ashes erupted from the tower, red, white, blue, and green fireworks lit up the sky for 10 minutes as the star-studded crowd, including John Kerry, Jack Nicholson, John Cusack, Bill Murray, Benicio del Toro, Sean Penn, Josh Hartnett, ooh, my boy Josh Hartnett, and Ralph Steadman cheered.
And as the ashes fell about the land, the sound of Bob Dylan's Mr. Tambourine Man echoed through the valleys.
And that, ladies and gentlemen, is the story of Lisl Auman and the last of the battles fought by the iconic Hunter S. Thompson. We hope you enjoyed it.
Yes, we do. Very special episode for me, and thank you again for listening. You got something you want to tell us? Drop us a line at murdercoasterpodcast@gmail.com. That's murdercoasterpodcast@gmail.com. Thanks for listening. We will see you later.